Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the healthiest half hour anywhere online today. Appreciate you joining us here on Facebook and on YouTube. Coming up, we will be getting the latest on the COVID-19 pandemic with Dr. Neal Barnard. As we head into the holiday season, cases are continuing to surge, the country setting new records seemingly by the day. So where do we stand now, and what's the latest on the vaccines that are in development? We'll be catching up with Dr. Neal Barnard momentarily to get all of that information. Plus, we're going to be opening up the doctor's mailbag today, so go ahead and send in your questions. You can tweet them to us using the hashtag ExamRoomLive, or you can put them in the comments or the chat box right now. Also today, it is Motivation Monday, and best-selling author and educator Nicolette Richer, she is here to share how she's been transforming people with chronic disease into conquerors of their conditions, and she's doing it largely through nutrition. Looking forward to catching up with Nicolette on the show today as well. But first, let's get caught up on the latest happenings. Here are your health headlines for Monday, November 16th, 2020. And we begin with the coronavirus pandemic and the explosion of cases in the U.S., the spread showing no signs of slowing despite new restrictions that are being put in place. Since Friday, nearly 500,000 new cases being diagnosed, bringing the total number of infections now to more than 11 million. New York, which had been rocked early on by the pandemic, not immune to this next wave of cases. Cases there up 50%, and nearly every single state in the country also reporting increases. Hawaii now the only state to report a decrease in cases over the last week. But there is promising news on the development of another vaccine, and we'll be getting the latest on that with Dr. Neal Barnard momentarily. Turning now to nutrition news, there is new evidence that eggs are not all that they're cracked up to be. New research shows that eating the popular food can significantly increase your chances of developing diabetes. A study of more than 8,500 adults finds that eating just one egg per day increases your chances of diabetes by 60%. The research also shows that women who eat eggs are more likely to develop the disease than men. The study was published in the British Journal of Nutrition. And eggs aren't the only food to have their health claims debunked today. Another study now casting doubt on the effectiveness of fish oil for atrial fibrillation. Researchers in California tracked 25,000 adults for more than 5 years, finding no significant difference in the rates of arrhythmia among those who took a fish oil or vitamin D supplement and those who were just given a placebo. AFib is the most common form of abnormal heart rhythm, affecting some 33 million people worldwide. Previous studies have shown that a plant-based diet can be effective in lowering risk factors associated with the condition, including high blood pressure, heart disease, and obesity. Let's turn our attention now back to the coronavirus and bring in Dr. Neal Barnard to paint a clearer picture of where we stand as we head into the holidays. Health officials are urging people not to travel this Thanksgiving, saying that the risk is just too great as cases continue to increase exponentially. But there is promising news with the development of another new vaccine today, that perhaps now light at the end of this dark tunnel. Dr. Barnard, let's get caught up to speed here. Where do we stand right now with COVID-19?
Yeah, it's a rapidly moving picture, Chuck, I have to tell you. Let me show you some of the latest statistics. I want to start by looking at just the infection rate. This is from the very beginning of the pandemic to where we are as of today. If you can look along the bottom x-axis, it starts in March, huge initial spike. And these are cases, a number of people who caught the virus, not necessarily dying of it. And then it started to kind of cook along through April and May, but it was gradually dying down. And then in the summer, it started to pick up again, as we all have seen. The dotted line about 3/4 of the way across to the right, that's today. And what you can see is that things are heating up again. Things are not looking good. They're about where we were back in March. The three lines really depend on what people do. If there's a lot of preventive steps and masking and that kind of thing, there'll be fewer cases. Obviously, if there's a vaccine, there'll be fewer cases. If those things don't happen, there will be a lot more cases. And that's why you see the different projections on the right. But anyway, this is the number of cases. Let's look at the number of people who actually die, because that's your really important thing. And it's about the same. For whatever reason, the virus does not seem to be quite as fatal now as it was before. And some people have suggested, well, the people who were most vulnerable died of it. And so now you have other people who are slightly less vulnerable. We don't know. People are taking it more seriously, but still the death rates are hundreds every day, pushing 1,000 per day, some days. So not good. But as you mentioned, Chuck, we do have some vaccines in development. Everybody knows about the Pfizer vaccine done with BioNTech that came out 90% effective. And the best guesses are we're going to be seeing that rolling out somewhere early in the new year. It's going to take them a long time. It's comparatively long time. It's a challenging thing to store. It has to be stored at very cold temperatures. You have to have two, not one, but two shots of it. Nonetheless, this is all doable, and it's certainly going to happen. But on the heels of that, Moderna came out with a vaccine, and just today we heard the results of 94% effective, which is just huge. What the actual numbers are, they brought in 30,000 volunteers. Pretty heroic research study, I have to say. Of the 30,000, half got a placebo. So they were injected with just salt solution. Doesn't do anything. It's a dummy. And of those 15,000 people who were injected, 90 of them in the follow-up period got COVID-19. And some of them got it pretty seriously. Now, the other 15,000 got Moderna's trial vaccine. And so they get the injection, then they look to see what happens. And the number was down to 5. So it's not perfect, but it's as close to perfect as a vaccine can get, meaning when people were vaccinated, they're very unlikely to get the virus, and none of those 5 got it seriously. So that's where the numbers come from. There's a third, AstraZeneca has also got something going on, but it's these two, Pfizer and Moderna, that seem to be the first ones off the finish line. When are we going to see the Moderna one? New Year's, somewhere in there, the initial vaccines, but when it's coming to a clinic near you, sometime considerably after that period. There are a couple of others. Johnson & Johnson and Merck have been working in this space, but neither of them has anything that's close to finished. So that's the vaccine. Stepping away from the good news, Chuck, I got to tell you, we got to look at the bad news. The virus is, in fact, mutating, which is what you and I have been talking about ever since the beginning, and all the virology experts have been worried about. The virus is mutating. And the most clear-cut case recently, we talked about this the other day in Denmark, and for people who aren't watching, let me just bring you back into this. As of the 7th of November, 9 days ago, Denmark had 214 human cases of a mutated coronavirus. And where do they get it? They got it from the fact that people like mink coats. And the country that has the most mink on intensive farms is Denmark. And it turned out that on November the 4th, on Wednesday, a week and a half ago, the Prime Minister came out and said the virus has mutated in mink and has spread to humans. But what had to be clarified is that the mink don't come up with the virus on their own. It's not their virus. They got it from us. So human beings having the coronavirus that we have become accustomed to, working on the mink farms, transmitted the virus to the mink. And once it crosses the species line, what happens? The virus changes. It mutates, and it becomes a different virus that can be different in its infectivity and different in its disease process and different in its response to a vaccine. So November 4th, Denmark announced culling all the mink in the country. That would be about 17 million. It didn't happen, though. There was such an outcry from the people who have an economic interest in mink coats that they paused the cull, and it's anybody's guess right now. We have no idea. Mink clearly are harboring a new coronavirus, and not just in Denmark. We're seeing it in Spain and other countries as well. It's very likely going to spread. Okay, this was from a French epidemiologist who said, I think put it really well, every time the virus spreads between animals, it changes. And if it changes too much from the one that's circulating within humans at the moment, that might mean that any vaccine or any treatment that will be produced soon might not work as well as it should do. And that's what everybody's concerned about. So it's not just mink farms. It's these live animal markets that you have throughout Asia, but you've got them in the United States as well. You don't have to go farther than Brooklyn to find all kinds of live animal markets that are still operating, and then, of course, intensive animal farms. The latest new update that I wanted to mention, this just came in over the last couple of days. China has been extremely scrupulous about importing the virus. As you know, that's where the virus started. And so they've been testing and disinfecting imported food products. Well, 3 days ago, November 13th, some pork was found in Chengdu. It was imported from Argentina, and it had the coronavirus. And the next day, there was some shrimp that came up in Lanzhou that was imported from Saudi Arabia, and it had the coronavirus. And then in Jinan, the beef and tripe that was imported from Brazil and Bolivia and New Zealand all had the coronavirus. So China is continuing to monitor this and very concerned. Here in the United States, we have pork coming from Sioux Falls that nobody is testing, and everybody knows that some of these products are very likely carrying the coronavirus. So let me just suggest where we ought to be with this. Number one, we do have to prevent infections. That means masks. It means distancing. It means hygiene. Number two, we should really just be closing down the slaughterhouses and the other viral hotspots. We did it before. We can do it again. If anything, it will help all aspects of human health. Third, we do need to fast-track vaccine production and distribution. That is happening. To the extent that we are using the best research methods, we can get these over the finish line and have newer ones available, because the current ones may not last against mutated viruses. We'll just have to see. We do have to address underlying conditions, and this is where, I hate to say it, but every country, including the United States, has completely dropped the ball. We know that a person with diabetes has several-fold higher risk of dying of COVID-19 compared to a person who doesn't. But you would think that would mean we would be using nutrition, medical care as needed, get your prescriptions up to date. There has really been no attention to that whatsoever, apart from what we have been doing at the Physicians Committee. And then finally, we need to prevent what's called viral reassortment, making the new viruses. And if we ban the live markets and intensive animal farming, we've got a good shot at doing exactly that. All of these are political decisions. They are all really important. They should be made for a variety of reasons. And we'll just have to see how far we get. So back to you, Chuck.
Couple of things, Dr. Barnard, I want to follow up with you about. One is the current death rate. We've seen throughout the pandemic that when we see this spike in cases, the deaths, they kind of lag behind by 2 or 3 weeks. Are we expecting, even though we're seeing the mortality rate drop, are we expecting the overall number of deaths to increase along with this spike? Yes,
they will roughly parallel. There has been some improvement in the fraction of infected people who end up dying of it. That's diminished a bit, but we shouldn't kid ourselves. This is a very dangerous diet. We are a very dangerous virus, and we are expecting lots and lots of deaths in the future. And it will, just as you said, when you see a spike in cases today, look ahead a couple of weeks, and that's when the deaths are going to hit.
And we spoke about this a little bit last week, but I wanted to revisit it as well. You're talking about the mutating virus. What does that mean in terms of the vaccine potential moving forward? We see obviously these promising results, but I can't imagine that the 2 vaccines that have been in the headlines over the last 2 weeks account for the mutated virus that we just saw over in Denmark.
We can be optimistic and hope that the vaccines may work. There are a couple of things at play, though. The real issue is what part of the virus changes. A mutation means that the genetic material inside the virus is not the same. It's changing. And so if it makes a different spike, you remember the virus that has those little spikes around it like a cocklebur. If those spikes change, and if the vaccine was attacking the spike, then the vaccine would no longer work. However, vaccines can work by a number of methods, and they may not be attacking the spike. So we'll have to see. With the influenza vaccines, as you know, they're frankly not very good. The ones that we use every year, they will reduce influenza that year, but beyond that, the virus is always 2 steps ahead of you. So you've got to be making new vaccine and a new vaccine and a new vaccine. So those are the reasons why you do need to have vaccine production be up to date, but you also need to slow down the reassortment. To do that, you've got to keep the virus from jumping species. When it jumps species, that's when you really get the new viruses so aggressively forming.
And I'll tell you, the last thing before we go ahead and open up the doctor's mailbag is that my wife actually sent me a link to an article that was published this morning on TMZ, of all places, spotlighting a wet market in New York City and the connection there with COVID-19, the potential for an outbreak. I just thought that the fact that here's TMZ, a pop culture outlet, who has picked up on this and is following that speaks volumes for the knowledge that we're starting to acquire about this and how more and more people are learning about truly the origins of this.
It's very important. People have objected to these live markets anyway. For years, they've been concerned. You walk out of your Brooklyn apartment, you go down a block, and there's feathers and blood and smell and hideous cruelty. And it's something that people object to for obvious reasons. However, what have you got now? You've got a place where you're having one or more species of birds, typically, sometimes other animals in these markets. You have a certain number of people who may be clients or maybe workers who are carrying COVID. They may not know it. The virus can then leap from the human being to the animal. That's where the reassortment occurs. Now, a year ago, we didn't have that. We just had these disgusting markets. Now you've got markets with the COVID coming in and just waiting for reassortment. As Tony Fauci said right at the beginning, he said we should be banning all of these places. And by the way, I don't mean just in Brooklyn. I mean worldwide. There is no reason to have these live animal markets unless you just want to have viruses coming in on a fairly regular basis. So they should be banned.
All right, really quickly, let's go ahead and open up that doctor's mailbag. Today's question comes to us from Christy. Different subject. She's wondering about coffee and tea here, Dr. Barnard. So she writes, I have hypothyroidism and it has been a struggle to give up coffee and black tea. Does caffeine really have an effect on the thyroid?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm sorry to hear that you're dealing with thyroid issues, but no, caffeine is not really a big issue for thyroid disorders, except for some people, thyroid disorders can make cardiac arrhythmias. They can be a driver of cardiac arrhythmias, and caffeine can add to that. But for the most part, there's not an issue. One exception. If you are hypothyroid, you're low in thyroid, and you're taking Synthroid or some other thyroid supplement, don't take anything. Don't take any food, not coffee, not cream or nothing, about a half hour before and after you're taking your medication, because it's going to interfere with the absorption. You can have a glass of water to swallow it down, nothing else. So coffee gets a not guilty verdict for the most part, but don't drink anything about a half hour before to a half hour after your medication.
All right, Dr. Barnard, appreciate your time and your wisdom as always.
Thank you, Chuck.
All right, Motivation Monday time here on the Exam Room Live, and my next guest wears many hats. She is a health educator. She is an entrepreneur. She is a best-selling author, and she is a public speaker. And she happens to also be the founder of the Green Mustache Organic Cafe. How cool is that name for a cafe? The Green Mustache Organic Cafe. She's also on a mission to transform people living with chronic disease into conquerors of their conditions, managing and in many cases even overcoming the very diet-related diseases that claim millions of lives every single year. And with that, we welcome the motivational, the inspirational, the one and only Nicolette Richer here to the Exam Room Live. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you. That was a lovely introduction. Best one I've ever gotten.
Well, consider me humble. Wow. I want to talk about your I mean, you've just really dedicated your life to this. And when you were kind of talking with the producers about coming on the show, you flat out stated, look, chronic disease can be reversed. So what brought you to the idea of using nutrition so much in terms of treating these diseases?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it goes back about 20 something years for me when I had been working in government and been doing my master's and studying environmental sciences and really working in government to develop policies to protect human health and humans from all the toxins in our environment. At the same time, my best friend's father was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and he wasn't even offered chemo and surgery or radiation as a treatment. It was advanced. He was given about 3 months to live. Well, he ended up discovering a metabolic nutritional therapy, where food as medicine, plant-based, whole food, unrefined food was the only foods he would consume. And he did that solely, and he was cancer-free within a few months. Now, this blew the doctor's minds, but it blew my mind because I had not been looking at nutrition as a method of reversing any type of disease, let alone cancer. So he was 72 years old at the time, and he ended up living another 22 years, passing away at 94 years of age. So of course, being a researcher and looking at environmental health, I started looking at this metabolic nutritional therapy that he did, which is really plant-based, whole food as medicine, and started studying that. And then that's when I left government, started working with clients and teaching clients, and then eventually opening up my own restaurant. So it started from that moment. And of course, I dove deep into the research. I mean, Dr. Neal Barnard, the PCRM, so many other plant-based physicians out there know this research. But what I realized is the public didn't know this research. So as I started teaching my clients, they started reversing their chronic diseases. And I mean, the rest is history.
All right. So I think that given what we've talked about on this show for months and years at this point, we should know the answer to this, but I want for you to answer this next question in terms of somebody who is just beginning to learn about proper nutrition. The name of your book is Eat Real to Heal. So what is your definition of real food?
Yeah, that's a great question. So real food is food that is grown in the ground, that comes off a bush, that comes off a tree, that is not interfered with. And so food is, an apple is real food. Excuse me, an apple is real food. A fruit roll-up is not real food. Honey Nut Cheerios, not real food. But if we look at a hard red wheat kernel, for example, that you'd have to cook for 20, 30 minutes, that is real food. So we have processed food, we have unprocessed food, and then we have super processed food. And for the majority of citizens in North America, they're eating ultra processed or processed food. So that's when we denature the potato and turn it into a French fry and fry it in oils with lots of salt. That's foods that are covered in preservatives, refined sugars, refined oils, and of course all the colorings and everything that come in the food. Excuse me, got a frog in my throat.
It happens to the best of us. Don't worry about it. Hopefully that frog will leap out here momentarily. But I want to ask you one of the things that you talk about, and it gets so I get so jazzed up about this, as do a lot of our viewers, is you talk about the role that food plays in the gut microbiome, and then the connection there to all kinds of conditions, from your mental health to chronic pain to hormones and cellular regeneration. I mean, there's just so much there. So let's start with the chronic pain. When you're talking to people, when you're wearing that health educator hat and you're discussing with them the connection there, what is your message?
So the message between chronic pain and our health. So our body is a constant state of inflammation from the food that we're eating. So whether you eat an apple, whether you eat a carrot, a potato, a head of romaine lettuce, it doesn't matter what foods, or if you're eating French fries and a steak or potato chips. What happens is that the body automatically responds to what is being taken in. So that will create a state of inflammation. But the thing is that that inflammation will turn off when our body is regulated, when our immune system is regulated. It'll know to recognize the carrot and all the fiber, and then the body will turn off the inflammation. When we're eating constant foods like the processed and ultra processed foods, the body won't turn off that inflammation. It actually puts it into a hyper state of chronic inflammation. When the body is in a chronic state of inflammation, trying to deal with all of those things that I said, the refined oil, sugars, salts, the high sodium preservatives, the MSG, the food colorings, what happens is that the body in that chronic state of inflammation can never heal. It can never turn off that inflammation. And then what we see is disease develop from that. Now, that obviously leads to chronic pain. So many people are walking around and, they're complaining that their joints are aching, that their back is aching, their knees are aching, their skin is very sensitive. They're developing these autoimmune disorders. And really, then this all goes back to the gut health as well, which is something that you just mentioned. And so then that further debilitates our microbiome and our gut health, which then perpetuates that chronic inflammation. So unless we turn to that real food that I'm talking about, that is unprocessed, that is cooked well or eaten raw, or the combination of both, we're never going to turn off that chronic inflammation, and we won't turn off that chronic pain.
It never ceases to, just astound me and amaze me how all of this is so interconnected, and it so much begins with what's on your plate. Before we go and talk about something that you're doing that I think is absolutely extraordinary, the 22 Million Strong campaign, I also want to ask you about the Green Mustache Cafe. Talk to me about the Green Mustache Cafe. What is it? What do you serve? And how did you come up with such a righteous name?
Right. Well, I'll start with the name. My daughter was about a year and a half at the time, and we were sitting around the table with some friends. And this is when I really knew I needed to take the leap out of government and do something different, but I wasn't sure what that was going to be. And we had just made a beautiful, smoothie for everybody, the kids that were playing at our house, our friends, and my 2-year-old daughter. And she took the smoothie and it was full of berries and greens and, all whole foods. And she went to go drink it, and the whole smoothie just fell on her face out of the cup. And when we looked at her, she had this big green mustache. It was quite cute. And so my dear friend at the time, she said, "Oh my goodness, look at the green mustache." And right away, I knew it was going to be the name for a cafe. And at the time, them on how to switch their lifestyle over to real clean food as medicine to reverse their chronic diseases. And I was having such success, but my clients kept saying they couldn't go out and eat anywhere because all of the restaurants that are around us, they're full of those processed and ultra processed foods that contribute to the disease, that are actually creating the diseases in our body. And so they kept asking me if I would make the food for them and deliver them. And I mean, I had 3 kids at this time. That was not going to happen. I wasn't going to go door to door delivering food to my clients. And so that's when the idea for the Green Mustache came in. So what I did is put together a business plan. I had never, worked in a kitchen before. I was working behind a computer predominantly for my whole life. And so I just took the leap, and we had sold our house, and we took some of the savings from that, and we invested in the first cafe. And the premise behind the cafe is that all the food is grown as locally as possible, but it's always 100% organic. The food is often picked by our farmers at 5 a.m, and they come in their rubber boots and drop it off in our kitchens. And, we clean it, we process it, we turn it into meals like smoothies and soups and cold pressed juices, but a lot of cooked meals, really hearty cooked meals full of, potatoes and squashes. We have 150 different ingredients that are all real food. So the whole food, we don't have refined flours. We don't have processed, sauces. We make everything from scratch. We soak our beans, we soak our grains, and then we chop it up and cook it and prepare it for you. So we have delicious meals of all types that, they're gateway items for the public as well. People are used to having chilies and stews. And so we have those. We have delicious salads with roasted beets and other root vegetables and so on. And then of course we have some of the best desserts in the world that are all made without any sugar. It's refined sugars or flours or anything like that.
Matt, you're making so many people's taste buds water right now. A number of people in the chat room are like, "You got to ask her, where is she? What's her website?" So give us the details.
Yeah, so we are thegreenmustache.com. So green mustache spelled the French way. So MOUSTACHE.com. Now, don't mistake us for the Green Mustache that's in New York, because they sound similar, but they have processed food that's packaged, and they're the Green Mustache spelled the other way, the non-French way. So we are based in Canada right now, but we actually have 10 locations that are coming to New York once the borders open. So that was put on hold because of COVID, unfortunately.
All right, let's go ahead and I got to ask you while you're here, you are doing one of the coolest initiatives that I have heard of in forever. It's something called the 22 Million Strong campaign. What is this? What are you doing? Share it with the viewers, because the exam roomies' heads are going to explode when they hear how cool this is.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this as well. And the 22 Million Strong campaign really it's the intersection between my career. So, all the work we're doing with our Green Mustache companies, our wellness center, we have a nutrition and detox wellness center, we have the consulting company, we have the cafes, and we also have a charity that works with Indigenous communities. So, I'm also doing my PhD. And I know a lot of people think that's crazy, but I'm telling you, when you eat real food, you have unlimited energy and you can do all of these things. But what I noticed is when COVID happened, I really decided that I had to, merge all of my efforts and simplify my life, but also be able to do the really good work that we're doing. So 22 Million is all about me running and cycling 7,120 kilometers across Canada. And this was because for so long I've been sitting behind my desk and sitting in a chair consulting clients, running my businesses, that I actually forgot about the movement part of health. And so it was also to get me out of my chair and get me moving my body. Now, along this tour across Canada from the West Coast to the East Coast of North America, I'm going to be stopping and meeting with Indigenous communities and physicians and youth along the way. And we'll be meeting around real food dinners, and we'll be discussing the social determinants to health of that particular community, looking at the barriers to these community members being able to access clean, real food, because a lot of Indigenous communities all around North America, not just in Canada, they're forced to eat out of gas stations. They don't even have supermarkets in their communities anymore. And so they're eating ultra processed foods. And it's why we see the diabetes rates and heart disease rates, the cancer and other chronic disease rates so high in Indigenous communities. So it's to be able to identify those systems so we can go back in after the tour, work with government agencies, work with the public to be able to raise the funds to be able to go in and implement the systems that are needed to create real food opportunities in these communities.
And those opportunities are so desperately needed. Hearing you describe that, you said all over North America, and that's so true. One of the things that we do here at the Physicians Committee is really try to work with the Indigenous community and bring them healthier food, because I remember being out in Arizona last year and going to a seminar out there and just listening and hearing that there may only be one or two grocery stores for a place that is the size of the entire state of Rhode Island. Okay, so you're talking about having to organize bus trips just to go to the grocery store. And that idea to so many of us is so foreign. But then when you see the rates of these chronic diseases, you talk about eating out of a gas station. No wonder the rate of diabetes and cancer is so much higher in these communities. If all they have access to are these ultra processed foods, then of course you're going to see these higher rates of disease.
Exactly. These food deserts are not just occurring in Indigenous communities. I mean, they're really all over North America. And until people understand that relationship between their health, chronic disease, and what they put in their mouth, then, that's not going to change. We're going to just see desertification, not only of our grocery stores and our food systems, but actually of the soil as well. So everything, like you said earlier, is interconnected. So the great thing about, terrible things about COVID, but one of the great things that we have seen happen in Indigenous communities across Canada, and I'm sure in the United States as well, is that people, because they were at home, because they couldn't access food, they started growing gardens. And that's something we've been doing with the Indigenous communities in our area, is just, teaching people how to grow food. And this is the knowledge that Indigenous members all around the world have known for thousands of years. And so it's just really this 22 Million Strong tour is about helping them remember the knowledge they've held for thousands and thousands of years.
And you said you're traveling how far? 7,200 kilometers?
Yeah, 4,400 miles approximately.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I was trying to do the math when you were saying that earlier. I was like, oh yeah, that's a long way. So where can people go to learn more about this?
Yeah, they can go to all of our websites. So greenmustache.com, but also richerhealth.ca. That's our other company. They can go there. They can also just, Google my name, NicoletteRicher.com. They can find that information. And they can also sign up on Facebook for our 22 million strong training tribe, because I'm sharing my training program as well as my plant-based whole food nutrition program that I'll be the first woman to cross North America on a fully plant-based diet. So you can follow my training and all the nutrition programs. You can implement it yourself. We have dozens of people that have gotten up off the couch that are now running and cycling anywhere from an hour to 5 hours a day. They're literally following my training program, and it's been very exciting to watch that as well.
And what's the target for when you're actually going to embark on this journey?
June 1st in 2021.
All right, June 1st, 2021. So that's what, 8 months from now. So
8 months of training.
Well, you best be training, because that is a long way. But you just seem like you're so motivated. Clearly, you're eating the right things. I have no doubt that this is going to be a successful journey for you, and you're going to bring help to so many people. So really, my hat is off to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm going to need all the cheering on that I can get. So yeah, if anybody can support just by joining our training tribe, that would be amazing.
You got it. And I will be your number one cheerleader here in the Washington, D.C. area. So go, Nicolette, go.
Thanks so much, Chuck.
All right, Nicolette Richer, thanks so very much for joining us here on the Exam Room. Go ahead and check her out, the Green Mustache Cafe. And definitely you're going to want to follow that journey. What an epic commitment. That's so amazing. So 22 million strong campaign, definitely one to keep an eye on. And you're also going to want to keep your eye out for the show here tomorrow. Tomorrow we have a fascinating show with Dr. Hannah Kaliova. She's going to be back. Whenever she's on the show, she brings the science and she brings it strong. So tomorrow we're going to be looking at soy and how that may actually help prevent dementia. The connection there, pretty cool. So we've got breaking research there. Dr. Kaliova will be presenting, plus Dr. Jasmine Sardana will be here singing a nutritional tune for us, opening up the doctor's mailbag, going to help raise our nutrition IQ. So you're not going to want to miss that. But in the meantime, if you have any questions or you just want to get going on your own health journey, you want to work with a plant-based doctor or dietitian who truly understands what it means to put nutrition first, go ahead and schedule an appointment with the Barnard Medical Center. You can do that by calling 202-527-7500 or hop online at barnardmedical.org for a full list of states where services are available. Telemedicine visits are the name of the game, and insurance is accepted. So barnardmedical.org or 202-527-7500. Get the opportunity to work with so many of the guests who have been on this show. Dr. Jim Loomis, Dr. Jazz, she's going to be here tomorrow. Dr. Vanita Rahman, dietitian Lee Crosby, and Susan Levin, Maggie Neola. Everybody there will be so happy to work with you. So all you need to do is hop over to barnardmedical.org or call 202-527-7500 to schedule your appointment today. And for today, that, my friend, is all the time that we have. I want to say thank you once again to Nicolette Richer for joining us and sharing that incredible story with us. Such a cool thing. 22 million strong campaign. I love that. And I also want to say a big thank you to the crew behind the scenes that helps make the show what it is. Thank you, guys. And to you who is watching right now, my exam roomie, you guys are the reason why we do this show. Thank you so very much for tuning in. And on behalf of everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. We will talk to you again tomorrow. But until then, stay safe, take a stand, and keep it plant-based.